This episode may contain stories of domestic violence. Please be advised. Welcome to the Sage Advice Podcast, where each week we sit down with people just like you who have left abusive relationships and found healing. Don't forget to check out our website, sage.community, because together we can survive abuse with grace and empathy. Now sit back and get comfortable. The Sage Advice Podcast starts right now. Hey everyone, welcome to the Sage Advice Podcast. This is the very first episode of 2022, and I'm so excited. We have a guest today coming on to share her story. Her name is Alexis, and why don't we just dive right in? Hi Alexis, thanks for being here.
Hey, I am so happy to be here and have this opportunity.
Yes, Alexis reached out on Facebook and was ready to share her story. And I don't know much about it. So what made you reach out and decide it was a great time to tell your story, Alexis?
Well, I've actually been writing. I love writing. And the more that I find people that are like my safe people to tell like my story to, they say like, this is very insightful stuff. This helped me go, heal through X, Y, and Z. And it is my goal to, create a podcast one day. And so I feel like this is a good start to kind of dip my toes in the water and see how it all works.
Absolutely. So where did you want to start with your story?
I guess the best way to go about it would be just to kind of start in the beginning and lay some foundation with the start of the relationship.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Where did you meet?
Well, I grew up in a small town, and the selection of people in the gay community, there really wasn't much of one.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine from college had told me about a dating app where I could connect with other lesbians, and like I would have the ability to like set the distance.
Okay.
So I connected with a woman in St. Louis, which 2.5 hours away from where I was located.
Okay. I'm from the Midwest too.
It's now that I've lived in the city, I cannot imagine going back to a small town.
I get it.
Yeah. So she was much older than me, but I've always connected with people that are much older. So we hit it off on every level and talked a few weeks before we met. She was very charming and had this laid back, like easygoing vibe about her.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved that, I'm like, okay, there's no intimidation here. It's just kind of free and open, and just, we talked about everything.
It's not like you finally feel like you found a connection kind of thing. It's hard when you're out there on the dating apps, especially.
Definitely. Yeah. And I mean, we talked over the phone, we FaceTimed. I mean, I knew I wasn't being, like catfished or anything like that as far as I knew.
Yeah. Well, in one way you were being catfished. Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And then come to find out. Yeah. But yeah, so like I came to St. Louis, and then within minutes of us meeting, we became intimate due to a lot of like built up sexual tension over the previous weeks.
Happens fast sometimes.
Yeah. Yes. And we then went to dinner, and I remember making the joke, I think we did this backwards. And, we spent a full week making elaborate dinners together, drinking nice wine, driving around in our sports car, just having a lot of sex. Then a few weeks into knowing each other, I met her kids, who were 8 and 10.
Wow.
Yeah. About a month of us knowing each other, she asked me to move in. The first red flag I look back on, it should have been how quickly the relationship was moving. But
funny, I heard another podcast this week about, the Dirty John, that movie.
mm-hmm.
And it was the same thing where she doesn't normally let people meet her kids so fast, and then it all goes so fast. Mine went super fast, and you get wrapped up in it.
It's everything. I mean, you meet this person and they, kind of, I don't know. I wouldn't say that was necessarily the love bombing stage at that point yet. I think it was more of just this mask that she'd put on, that she was like this amazing, great, I have nothing wrong with me, everyone's hurt me in my life kind of person, know? And I mean, and then after a year, she proposed, which was exciting for me, but there was so much going on that I honestly was not happy when she proposed to me.
Really? What had changed?
Just like everything, I had, picked up on a lot of the abusive patterns and stuff that had happened. And I feel comfortable talking about a lot of those. So I can definitely open up about that. But I was caught off guard with the way she was treating me and the things that she had said, that why would she propose to me,
When after my boyfriend and after I left, he was like, oh, I was going to propose this year. And I don't know, sometimes I think it's a way of just trying to keep you when they know you're kind of figuring out their game.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was about a year into it. When did you start realizing these patterns, and what were they?
So, well, from the start, it was pretty much, I realized that she'd begun stripping me of my identity when she called me Alex. And she introduced me to everyone like in her circle as Alex, because she says that made me sound older.
Weird.
Yeah, it was a weird thing. She said Alexis sounded like a younger name. And so my name then became Alex. And it was so uncomfortable, because I was like, no one in my life has ever called me that. And I went with it because I wanted to like live this life with her. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like whatever she wanted, that's who I was. And I look back and I'm like, whoa, there's like this group of people that know me as Alex, and that's not who I am.
Well, and it probably felt like at the time it wasn't a big deal, even though it maybe made you feel uncomfortable. It's like, why am I being weird about a name thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. But you're right. When you said it stripped you of your identity, I get that. It does.
Weird. Like people sometimes, I meet like strangers now and they'll like mispronounce my name and say Alex or something. And it honestly triggers me for a second, because I'm like, whoa, no. That is not my name. It's taking me back a little bit there.
Yeah. Wow. I've never heard that, but it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just, I don't know, like another one that was like a violation of my privacy. So I had found she was really big on like, if she would go to work or something and I would be home, she'd be like, hey, send me a sexy picture or something like that. And I would, because I thought that it would be safe and it would never go anywhere. And
oh no.
Yeah. And so I had found an intimate picture I had sent. She had sent that to a close guy friend of hers. And yeah,
God.
Yes. And so I kept scrolling, and I not only found that picture of me had been sent, but like the two of them had gone back and forth sharing intimate photos of people they were sleeping with, like previous to me.
Wow. Did you, when you found that out, how did she react to, obviously I'm sure you were not happy.
Well, I honestly didn't know what to think. Like I was disgusted and my stomach sank, because I was like, my head just kept spinning. I was like, what if she sent other photos, that kind of a thing. And I confronted her about it. I was very calm. I just simply asked, have you ever sent an intimate photo of me to your guy friend? And at first she paused, and I could tell she was thinking of something, a lie to make up. And I had confronted her months after the fact because I just didn't know how to go about it. And she had said, I did send it. It wasn't as revealing as some of the photos you sent me. And I wasn't in love with you then. But I was living with her. I had met her kids. We had gone on a vacation. Like, she just, and I believed her. And I just, like, the way she justified it all, I was like, oh, okay, I trust you.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that she just went into immediate justification to put it back on you for not feeling bad. Like, don't feel bad because, like, you took it the wrong way. It wasn't that bad, kind of like throw it right back on you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I felt so awkward moving forward, like being around her friend, because I'm like, whoa, dude, he's seen intimate photos of me. Like, it just not a good thing. But that was really where it started with like the privacy thing and just
trust. It's trust. She broke your trust in a very significant way and didn't think there was anything wrong with that.
Yeah. And the whole, like, I felt honestly though, as I became like her property, because like she would start to say like my body was only hers to look at, and like sex became only on her terms. Like, in the beginning it was very fun and free and really great, but then it became a total change. Like, if I were to initiate it, she would say I was being needy, and then she did not want to be intimate. Whenever she wanted to do it, whatever she wanted to do, we did,
And then there's consequences if you say no, or if you're not in the mood.
Like, we were in the middle. This is probably going to be a little vulgar, but we were in the middle of having sex with a strap on, and she wanted to switch to using a larger sized dildo on me. And I had said no. Like, and she kept begging, and she continued to go about the process. And I said, no, like, I don't know what you're getting out of this. This is not you being affected. Like, absolutely not. And she said, don't worry about me, just lay back and I will do everything. And it hurt. And I acted like it felt good just to get it over with. But like, at that point, like, I completely shut down and lost my sex drive, at which, like, then she started to say things like our sex is vanilla, and faulting me. And, she would say things like, oh, well, I have other people like I could call up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a really shitty tool that a lot of abusers use. It is, because it does hurt on a deeper level. There's something inside of you that hurts.
For sure. And to be in such a vulnerable space to share your body with someone and be intimate and have them really violate you. That was like twice within the same kind of time frame, with like the picture and then the violation of just, I said no.
Yeah. Well, it's all, it's like, it's small steps that give them more power and control, like, just, it's a process. It doesn't happen right away. That, I try to stress that to a lot of people who talk about like, well, why don't you just leave, or why don't you just break up? And, it's a process of control that's happening.
And it's so like, I just feel like it's so tedious, and I don't even know if that's the correct word, but or calculated, maybe.
Calculated. It feels very calculated. It feels like they have a manual that they're following sometimes, that you're like, are you writing this down? Because it's just so calculated. But I think it's just always odd to me that it's like a personality trait to be an abuser. It's like they do the same thing. They write textbooks about it. It's just weird.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just like, and people talk about the escalation of it, where it's like these tiny things will happen and then it's great for months, a year, whatever. And then it just all kind of blows up, and eventually they do show themselves,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And another thing I remember where she really put my safety, at risk was we took a vacation to Cancun.
It's always telling on a vacation. Vacations are always telling. Oh God.
And we had been on a few like smaller trips before, but this was kind of a bigger one. And, you know, I actually ended up taking her on this vacation. So it felt good to have that.
Mm-hmm.
But and I can laugh about it now because I've healed through it, but it all just sounds so crazy to like why I even stayed after this.
Yeah.
You know? But like we had skipped over to another island and we had a few drinks. No one was really completely drunk out of their mind. We had to catch a boat back over to where our resort was. And I still to this day don't know what happened, but we were standing that caused her to like flip out. But we were standing in a line with a bunch of people waiting to get on. And these people like got back in line in front of us because they had stepped aside to smoke. She flipped out, started screaming in front of all these people, telling these people like, how dare you cut us? You need to go to the back of the line. And, you know, I was embarrassed. Like I just like looked away and this guy was speaking Spanish. She starts mocking him in Spanish.
Oh no.
Yeah. And all these people were staring and I start tearing up. And she makes fun of me, shoves me into these strangers and says, if I'm going to be against her and not on her side, why don't I go be with them?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So she leaves the line and I'm calling her. I'm like, this boat's loading. It's either this one or the way later one, right? Doesn't answer. I leave the line. I go to find her. She doesn't say anything. We have to wait another hour for the last boat to pick us up. Like, so yeah. And I told her, I was like, listen, and like, we're in another country. I don't care.
It's scary in another country because you're like, oh crap, I can't just leave. I don't like, I
can't call a friend and be like, help me out, you know?
Yeah.
It was late at night. And so we get on this last boat and I look at her and I said, listen, I don't care how mad you are. We're not separating. Like I could get kidnapped, like taken, like, you know, whatever. And she literally looked at me and said, well, that would solve all of your problems. At least that would solve all of your problems.
Wow.
And yeah. And she went and sat elsewhere. She sat up top and I went to the bottom. And at this point I was freaked out at kind of how her behavior was changing that quick. And I messaged a friend what was going on. And I said, listen, my phone is at 5%. I don't know what's going to happen. Like when we get off of this boat, I don't even know where she's sitting. So we get off and I find her and I say, this is not where they picked us up. This is not our resort. I don't know where we are. And she said, you're a big girl, figure it out. So I don't really know what that meant because she was in the same situation I was we're not
like, are we not going to the same place? Okay.
Right. And so I was in a thong bikini, a tank top, and my phone was at 5%. And so I Google our resort, I Google Maps it 2.5 miles away.
Oh Lord.
Yeah.
Any taxis?
And well, so right, you would think like we were looking for a bus, taxi, anything that would come up along the side of this like strip. Literally nothing for about half a mile. I was walking ahead of her. I kept looking back occasionally, you know, to make sure that she was there, making sure she was okay. Right.
Yeah. As a good, caring person that you are. Yes.
Right. And I turn around at one point, she's gone. I am the only one on the street. It's dark. I'm dressed how I was. My phone at this point was at 3%. I start freaking out.
You're like, this is where I die. That's great.
Like, this is it. Like, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She ended up actually hopping a bus, didn't yell at me that she was hopping one.
Wow.
Yeah. And so by this point, my friend back in St. Louis was like, do I need to take like extra measures? Like, you just need to let me know, like, you got back there safe, you know? I was so terrified. I took off running and I literally ran about 2 miles back to the resort because I was so freaked out. And
I'm glad you made it.
Thanks. Yeah.
That is terrifying. And I'm saying I had a crazy Costa Rica trip right before we broke up. And yeah, there's a lot of
way.
There was I think about those people a lot, like the people on the boats, because we did, like a fishing trip and that I had no interest in and he super cheaped out on and found some randos on the beach.
Ooh.
But then he like left me on a sunset cruise, like, and freaked out screaming at me the entire bus ride because he left his wallet, but that was my fault. And so he couldn't stay and gamble and drink. And like, he had to buy bottles of liquor everywhere we went, which was super embarrassing. And I could just feel the other people on the boat looking at me like, oh, you poor person.
Right.
That was embarrassing. I think about them a lot.
And sometimes you kind of wish like people wouldn't, like maybe sometimes in those situations, people are like, I wish someone would have stepped in, but you absolutely, I know I didn't want anyone to say a word.
Yeah, no, you can tell by how they look because they can see it and they hear it, obviously. And you're just like, this is embarrassing. Or like, I know you think I should get the hell away from him, but you're trapped. What are you going to do?
Right.
Like you're in another country.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. And after she had this flip out, I mean, I made it back. She didn't even care. She was in bed. She was asleep. The next morning, we woke up and I just couldn't speak to her. The only thing I think I said was, I cannot believe you did that last night. And she told me that I needed to pack my things when we got back home and find somewhere else to live. And she kept coming closer to me and it was weird because like she was saying like, I need to find somewhere else to live. And she kept coming closer to me to kind of like be intimate in a way, like put her hands on my hips and just kind of like talk and whatever. And I put
confusion and chaos and control. It's all part of it. Yep.
Yeah. And I couldn't see it then, and I just knew I wanted her to be completely away from me. So I put my hands up and they just ended up on her chest and I'd never pushed her. I never, was violent in any way. But once I did that and my hands came in contact with her and I said, please I need space. She claimed I pushed her, right? Like I was being the violent one. I was reacting in like this crazy way and all this stuff. And I collected my thoughts and I thought, you know what? Like, screw you. I'm not going to ruin the rest of this vacation. And so I left the hotel room and I went and rented a jet ski and took it out by myself. And she kept blowing up my phone. She's like, meet me for dinner. We won't argue. I just really want to have a nice dinner with you as long as you can behave and not bring up last night.
You behave?
It was like stuff like that, right? Like
she's treating you very childlike.
That is something my therapist had pointed out. Once we got into the thick of really processing all of this, she was like, whoa, and the things like that she would say to me and how she would text me like, you're going to apologize right now. And I demand an apology. And if you don't, then like, I'm not talking to you or I'm blocking you or whatever it might be,
Right.
Very and telling me that I needed to own things that honestly were not mine to own.
Yeah.
And
deflection and wow. Yeah. There's a lot of manipulation going on there.
A ton. And
a lot.
And
yeah.
I just think, I never realized what was happening in the moment. And the isolating from my family and friends was probably one of the hardest things and probably still one of the hardest for me to even kind of look back at emotionally. Because I did grow up very close to my family. I am a very big like people person. And you look at that and think, whoa, I shoved all of these people away for this person telling me they don't love you, or them making fun of every single friend I ever had, and me disconnecting from all of those friends. That isolation really pops in.
Yeah. It's so, so common, and it sucks because they mess with your head. I can absolutely relate to them making fun of family, friends, telling them they don't love you. And usually I tell them to go F himself because I'm very close to my friends and family, and that didn't go over well. But man, it feels really good in the moment when you do have those fight back moments.
Yes, for sure. And
for sure.
And one thing that I do, the longest time that I think I went without seeing my family was 6 months. And while we touched base every now and then over the phone, it's like, it was just best for me to kind of hide away. And, they noticed, especially my sisters, they noticed that like I was not the same. Yeah. And I mean, they allowed me to handle it on my own, in which I appreciated, because I honestly would have pushed them away even more had they tried to intervene.
Well, that's the reality that I try to tell a lot of people when they want to do something. It's like, if you insert yourself too much, the person's just going to pull away, because they're so wrapped up in whatever's going on in the relationship. And if like you try to attack that person, it's not going to go well in the moment, afterwards you see the light, but you're so manipulated that you defend them until you stop.
That's true. And anyone that said anything bad about her, like even if it was just as simple as she is such a bitch, my stomach would turn and I would feel bad for her that someone was calling her a name.
Well, yeah, you think if only they knew what this person was like, really like, and all the good things. And I would get frustrated. Like, why can't he show my friends the good stuff? And then they would like him, and this wouldn't be so tense and awkward. Yeah. But then, you still have the defensiveness until the manipulation goes away. Sometimes even after you've left, it sticks around for a little while.
Oh gosh, it sure did for me. And I remember having a conversation with my grandma, who's like my absolute best friend. And she told me, she said, I knew you could do it. You're strong. You just had to figure it out. And if you couldn't figure it out, I knew you would let me know to step in.
Oh, that's nice.
And I appreciated that more than anything, because it's like, they saw it. I knew that if it got to a point, I technically had people, even though it was going to be embarrassing and whatever.
Yeah.
And the emotional abuse just like got so bad that I started to not even recognize myself. Like I didn't have any hobbies. I was having minor health issues due to just like the stress and anxiety, and my memory was absolutely horrible.
I don't remember a lot of that time period. It's
from
like
dissociation, do you think?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I would lay in bed and stare at the wall. And my friends will now say, oh, remember when this happened, or remember when that happened, or like, if I go back and look at like paperwork from when we go into court and stuff, I'm like, oh, I totally forgot that happened. Like, I just don't even remember a lot from that time period, which I'm okay with. I'm okay with it. But yeah, with that massive stress, you start blocking it out.
And, dissociation, I've come to learn, can be an amazing and helpful survival mechanism, but also it can be, it can have the opposite effect at times as well.
It's not a good way, not a good mode to stay in long-term if you can help it and work through it. So after, no, because we're actually, I told you it would go by fast. We're getting close to time, but So after she proposed, obviously you left. How did you get up the courage to leave and end it?
Well, yeah. So I eventually, like she started using words like, this is my world. You're just living in it. This isn't your home. All of this stuff. She proposed and I immediately, I said yes. And I didn't know what to think. I think I was in this false hope,
Yeah.
We immediately kind of went into planning a wedding and everything, but then something changed where she was like, I know you really want to be a mom. She goes, why don't we just do it now? And
Wow.
she really wanted another kid and everything. And so I considered it. And to this day, I'm really glad that we didn't go through with, I was going to schedule a doctor's appointment, get everything started, but she then had gotten that's when the physical abuse kicked in. A lot of things were happening where it was like, she started out with like charging me or just throwing things or saying like she wanted to rip my vocal cords out. Like this kind of stuff started happening. And it was one night, like we finally said, like, I found a place. We had a few weeks before I was going to move into that place. And she started an argument one evening that resulted in me being shut in between a door with the door handle like wedged into my hip, causing my leg to go numb. I eventually got my way out of it, and she was telling me to get out of the house. What's wrong? Are you having anxiety and can't see straight? Like just being awful as she kicked me out.
Wow.
Grabbing the clothes out of my hands that I was collecting. I had worked the next day. I had no idea where I was going to go because I didn't have anyone in the area.
Yeah.
So it escalated. She eventually, put her hands on my neck, and I told her to get them off. She spit in my face. It was awful. And so I left that night, and I couch hopped with two acquaintances that I am forever grateful for weeks. I had to, because my apartment ended up not being ready yet. Like it just was a whole disaster, and trying to just really survive like through the days and emotionally cope with what I was going through was so difficult.
It is. I cried a lot in the car.
Yeah. And leaving work, and I would get through the workday and no one knew what I was holding in. And as soon as I got to my car, it just all came out.
Yeah. Well, I'm so sorry that that happened. And I'm so thankful for you to be open enough to share. And especially, we haven't had anybody talk about, a lesbian gay relationship, and it's not just men. And I think it's important to know. And so I really value you coming on and telling your story. And thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thanks for, having the space where I do feel open enough to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I know we obviously couldn't get to every little thing in a half an hour, but thank you for coming and sharing your story. It's definitely going to impact people out there. And if anybody else listening wants to come on and share their story, it's really, it really does help people. I get messages all the time saying how much somebody has listened and it's really made an impact in their life. So know that that's what you're doing when you're coming on. And hopefully we'll hear more stories soon and see you all next week. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks, Alexis.
Thank you.
Well, that's our show. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions or if you're willing to share your story, please email us at sageadvicepodcast@gmail.com. Until next week, remember, when you're kind to yourself, the healing can begin. See you next time.
This show was brought to you by inflowradio.com, the best curated talk radio network for personal development, wellness, spirituality, and conscious business.
If you or someone you love is in immediate danger, please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. For more information, please see the resources tab at sage.community.